Get vinyl while vinyl is still a thing. It won't be for long. Have you seen how long it takes for shit to get pressed now? Jesus. Blech.
We're gonna keep rolling. Welcome to the Riff Crew. I'm your host, Steve Mitchell, back for another big episode here on the Realm. And joining me over in Chile, DC is Skull. How you doing, mate?
That's right. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen in Cyberland. As you know, this is Skull, broadcasting from the past, present, and future in the Chamber of the Cosmos. Here with my good friend Steve Oz from Ozland. I'm an off-again, on-again DC bomb rock band Black Manta. I've been in the scene for about 35 years. I know people from all over the scene. Also, I worked at the Smithsonian for 20 years, and I incorporate my love and passion for history with my love and passion for music. As usual, always excited to be here. And we have a very special guest with us today. It's a real honor to introduce one of the godfathers of the fantasy genre. He's also a lyricist and member of Hawkwind and Blue Oyster Cult and creator of Elric and Eternal Champion Multiverse, Mr. Michael Moorcock. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me here. Good to see you again.
It's good to see you too. I was going to say it was just a few months ago, and it could be like an ongoing segment we call the Eternal Tales of Michael Moorcock or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Well, nothing
Well,
much happens in rural Texas to me anyway. So
well, I wanted to say happy birthday. You just had a recent birthday just a little while ago, about a month or so ago. So I wanted to
yeah,
say
about a
happy
month ago.
birthday.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. It seems very weird being as old as I am. I never expected to make it this far. I'm about 40 years older than I thought I'd be. At least 40 years older than I thought I'd be. Very, very odd feeling. Don't feel any. I mean, I haven't grown up at all. I'm still, but my body seems to be a little less responsive than it used to be.
Well, the world's a better off place that you've lasted an extra 40 years for us
Well,
to enjoy
thank
your
you.
amazing work.
Thanks a lot. Well, at least I still am working, which I suppose is something. I don't know why I'm still working, but I still am. I still feel I can get better. I could do better. I'm not
Hmm.
quite satisfied yet with anything I've done.
Right. Well, yeah, I wanted to say, I mean, I consider you like a true wizard of the genre and one of my biggest literary heroes. And along with Tolkien, considered, you were probably considered one of the grandmasters of the fantasy genre. And you were there from the very beginning. You influenced entire generations of writers and filmmakers, comic books, role-playing games, going on probably about 60 years now, but you're also a huge fan of music as well. And you're currently working on that you just released a new album, the
Yeah,
Spirits
that's the
Burning
first
album.
half. I'm working on the. I think we start, or at least I do my part of the recording in about a month. So that it's the second half of. I can't remember what it's called.
I have it right
Yeah, that
here.
one. Yeah.
The End of All
Um,
Songs, Part
End of
One.
all songs. Yeah, yeah. And a lot of it's all the tracks are already down, but I still have my work to do. So I'm looking forward to that actually. I was enjoy. I'm also supposed to be doing an album with Alan Davey of I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but Alan wants me to do re-record some of my old songs. Some of my, in fact, my first single, at least one of those, and
Hmm.
also some Calvert songs, which I like very much. I mean, I was actually on some of his songs doing backing vocals and sometimes playing. I played a 12-string Rickenbacker on Hype, I think, and I played banjo on the one we did with Eno that Eno produced with Lucky Leaf and the Long Ships. Which is still one of my favorite albums. Actually, I think he was a very good uh, writer, Bob.
Is that a Bob Calvert album?
Yeah, yeah. It's he did. I wasn't on. I had nothing to do with the first one, which was Captain Lockheed and the Starfighters,
Oh, right.
which was about the starfighters falling out of the sky as they tended to do when they first started. and then Lucky Leaf and the Longships, which I was involved with. In fact, the weird thing is there's a riff I suggested to Eno on one of the songs, and I suppose it was about a month ago, I was listening to it. There was a track backing a movie, you know, it was just in the background of the movie. And I said, I bet that, and it was a David Bowie track, but I said, I bet Brian Eno had something to do with that, because it was exactly the same riff that I suggested to Eno to do on Calvert's album. It wasn't, I mean, there was nothing particularly unusual about the riff, but it was just, you know, it was the riff. So I can say that I've composed a riff for David Bowie.
Well, do you want to tell your fans out there, the viewers out there, a little bit more about this trilogy?
Well,
or
yeah,
because it's like a super group of like Hawkwind family members and BOC family members. It's really an prog rock epic.
yeah,
And
it is. I mean, it's got a lot of really good people on it. Paul Rudolph, who was in the Pink Fairies, as well as Hawkwind briefly, and you know, and they're all over the world now. Of course, they've spread, at least the English-speaking world, pretty much, and some of the French-speaking world, I suppose. I wrote 3 comedies. Really, they're comedies about the end of the world. I like doing comedies about things like that, and this was essentially the end of time, and it's called, I think the overall thing's called Dances at the End of Time, and it's set in a world far, far, far in the future, where people really don't have much to do, and so, you know, they spend their time inventing very weird stuff. And every so often a time traveler from the past comes and you know, there are things that's the plot basically. A Victorian time traveler, a rather prudish Victorian time traveler comes to the future and finds it absolutely awful. I mean, she's she can't, because they don't know anything about morality, you know. But they're curious. They're perfectly amiable. You know, they want to know from her what all these strange ideas are, but they don't really have any morality, you know, themselves. They're actually essentially decadents from. They're inspired by the decadent movement of the late 19th century. Anyway, and it's a love story between one of the guys at the end of time and the lady, who's called Amelia, I think. Yeah, and Albert Bouchard was really the inspirer of the whole thing. He liked the books, and he wanted to do a musical version of them, and that's what they are. It's actually, of course, it's 4 records, but it's only 3 books. I think he couldn't really. I actually found the same thing when I was writing the last book, which is quite a bit longer than the other books. It was meant to be a trilogy, so I had to keep it a trilogy. I'd conceived it in that way. I conceived most of my books in various musical forms. It's just easy for me to think like that. They tend to be in trilogies or sometimes tetralogies. And this is a trilogy. And he just, you know, he started the whole thing, kicked the whole thing off. And Don Falcon is the producer as well as a musician on various instruments. And just the whole crowd of other people, most of whom I know or know slightly, not all of whom I know particularly well, but some I did. So it's a very nice, you know, nice thing. People seem to like it. At least the people who like it have said they liked it. The people who didn't like it haven't said anything. But I think it's very successful. Whether you like it or not, it's a very successful you know, I don't know, I don't know what you call it. It's gone straight out of my head. It's not an event.
It's like a concept epic.
Yeah. I mean, something like that. Concept, say, yeah. I think
I just saw Al. He's did like a mini 3 or 4 day tour of an Imaginos tour, and I just saw him recently, and I talked to him. I met him for the show, and I was like, we just interviewed, and we talked a little bit about it, about the spirits burning, and he's very excited about it.
Yeah. I've worked with Spirits Burning probably for about 20 years now, on different projects. They put out, well, basically they started off, I think, by putting out stuff that no commercial company in their right mind would put out, and as well as a bunch of demos. And rehearsal tapes that Pete Pavley and I did for 2 of my books. But we never finished them, unfortunately. And Pete really didn't want them to come out, which I only learned afterwards, after I'd given Don the go-ahead to do it. So I put that in because I felt bad about Pete. Pete got rather pissed off about it. So I hereby apologize to Pete in public. But I think I thought they were good enough to put out. Pete's a great musician. He's a great everything. I mean, Pete is an amazing person. I've only known 2 people well like him who can, anything they turn their hands to, they seem to be able to do well. You know, he's a very good sculptor. For a while, he was interested in bookbinding and produced these beautiful books. He started off by picking up his brother's bass, which his brother pretty much abandoned, and within a very short time became one of the most sought after bass players around, in my day, in the mid 60s on. And then he got bored. He gets bored very easily. He got bored with that, and he then decided he wanted to play cello. He heard some cordai on the radio and thought, that's good, I like that. I'd like to play cello. So he started playing cello from his bass to the cello, decided that he needed a proper tuition in cello. So he went to music school in London for 3 years and got a degree in, I suppose you call it cello playing. I don't know what the official name of it was, but he's a great cellist, very good guitarist, and he can play pretty much anything.
So which Pete are you referring to?
Pete Pavley, and I'm talking about probably one of the first Spirits Burning albums that we did, and I think it was just called Demos and Rehearsals or something of that sort.
Oh, okay.
And it's partly it was done for a book of mine called Gloriana, and partly some of the others were done for a book of mine called Entropy Tango. Entropy Tango is probably the only finished piece that comes up from time to time. The rest of it is not. They're not really finished pieces, and he was upset about it because he's much more of a purist than I am, and he really needs to have everything absolutely perfect, whereas I don't mind just bunging it out and hoping somebody likes it. That tends to be my general attitude. Anyway, that doesn't have anything to do with the current album or the series of albums that Al did, but it really is. I mean, I'm really pleased with it. It's sort of what he's doing is sort of what I was hoping to do in the 70s, but I couldn't find any musicians who were that eclectic, I suppose, and had so many sort of musical ideas. Well, there were a few, but they were too expensive. I mean, we couldn't have used them anyway. Same with producers. We couldn't even find a piano player most of the time. to play the piano parts. So in the end, we just gave up both the projects, which is a shame, but I don't think we'll ever do them now.
I wanted to go back,
quite difficult.
like
Sorry.
musically, I just wanted to go back to the 60s a little bit, and we touched on it a little bit, but I was wondering, because you were part of the counterculture during the 60s. Did you ever go to like anything like the 14-hour Technicolor Dream or Christmas on Earth, or did you frequent the UFO Club or the Middle Earth Club or anything like that?
Well, we rehearsed at the Middle Earth Club. I don't think I ever actually went there as a customer, as it were. But that's in fact where I first heard Lemmy. We were auditioning for a new bass player, and I went with a bass player who wanted the job. But by the time we got there, Dave Brock had already heard Lemmy playing, and he was perfect. I must admit, the other guy had a wasted journey.
Oh, you mean in Hawkwind? It was a Hawkwind rehearsal.
It was a Hawkwind rehearsals, yeah. And that was the first time I met Lemmy too. I mean, I think it was probably the first time I met Lemmy. You never know, because we all drank in the same pubs, in the same area.
Did the same drugs?
Yeah. Well, not quite. I got quite as much speed as Lemmy did. He in fact became very friendly to me that night, and I wasn't quite sure why until I'd learned that he had mistakenly heard that I had a lot of speed, that I used a lot of speed, which I didn't. I had a lot of speed because my mother-in-law had given me some prescription drugs that she'd been given, probably to cheer her up or something. I don't know. I didn't use it. So I was happy to give it to Lemmy, because I had no purpose for me. I mean, I occasionally, the time came when most of the speed was in the Coke anyway. So that was why Lemmy had been so friendly to begin with.
You guys were best friends immediately.
Yeah, well, he also read my books. I mean, as you probably know, Lemmy was a great reader and a very erudite guy. I mean, he couldn't ride motorbikes, but he could tell you quite a lot about books.
Right.
I was talking to somebody about it's a Lemmy. Some people are doing a Lemmy project. Project was the word I was looking for. And they were asking. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm wandering off course, and I'll stop and have some.
Well, no, that's all right. I was wondering because we were talking. I was wondering if you were a fan of Motorhead. I don't know if you ever had a chance to ever see Motorhead play.
Yeah, I mean, I was a friend of Lemmy's, so I wasn't so much a fan of Motorhead. I mean, I had nothing against Motorhead, but I mean, I wasn't, I didn't follow them. But of course, I did see him playing a fair bit because, I'd meet him at gigs. I think it's the first time I ever met all the Blue Oyster Cult was at a gig at Hammersmith Odeon. It's how you tended to meet people in those days. Either you were playing in the same venue. That's really how I met an awful lot of people. I didn't tend to go to many gigs. I went to a Hendrix Who concert that was one of the best things I'd ever seen, except the Who were very under-rehearsed, but nonetheless, they were still very good.
Mr. Jimmy.
Oh, yeah. I tended to drift into gigs rather than actually think, I must get a ticket for that. I know I wanted to see Bruce Springsteen the first time he came to England, and I left it too late. All the record people had got the tickets, and I couldn't get a ticket to that, so I was a bit pissed off about that. So I tended to, if somebody said, come and see so and so, and it was a question of going in the back door, as it were, then that's what I'd do. I'd just go and see people who just two friends were going to see or whatever. You know, I'm very lazy. I don't have. I do whatever. In those days, in particular, you know, somebody said, "Let's go and do something." I would go and do it. You know, I was always happy to take a suggestion.
Do you want to elaborate on the Lemmy project a little bit?
Not really. I mean, I haven't got my. I was, you know, these guys were asking me about, and you know, I knew Lemmy as a friend more than as, you know, and of course as a bass player with Hawkwind, but as I say, I didn't go to that many gigs. I wasn't like a. I do know that when he was pretty famous, he was still sleeping on people's floors. I mean, we had the same manager, which is probably, which explained why. We'd both be turning up asking for our money at different times, or at the same time. You know, we'd be in the queue outside the door. But no, I mean, I you know, he was a nice guy, and I suppose I probably could say without any disparagement that I liked him more than I liked the music. The music was a little bit samey for my taste, but you know, but that's just because I'm not a strong heavy metal fan. I mean, I like a good band, you know, but it's really musicianship, I suppose, that I care most for.
Did you ever see or did you know about Black Sabbath back in the day?
I
Back in
heard
the
of Black
60s and
Sabbath.
70s?
If I'm not mistaken, Black Sabbath may be the band that I gave a very bad review to in the Sunday Times. I was standing in for the Sunday Times music critic, and so I went to see Black Sabbath, and I didn't like
what year was that, if you could enlighten
Oh God,
us?
it must have been probably the 70s, sometime in the 70s.
So the Ozzy era.
I would guess so, yeah.
Okay.
And it might not be Black Sabbath I'm thinking of, but I think it was Black Sabbath. And I know that, I think also there was another, maybe it was Black Sabbath that pinched the name Stormbringer. Did they do a Stormbringer album?
Oh, that was Deep Purple.
Oh, Deep Purple. Okay, it may have been Deep Purple. I'm getting mixed up with them. But I know I was fairly surprised to see my title turning up. Well, I mean, I'm not any longer, but I was at the time. I mean, people have done it so much more since. But at the time, I thought, hang on a minute, that's my title. John Martin did it first. You know, very different music. He did an album called Stormbringer, and then Deep Purple then presumably did it. And I know that they tried to make out that it was a mythological term. There was an interview in Melody Maker, probably, in which they say, you know, did you deliberately take the name Stormbringer from Michael Moorcock's book? And they say, no, it's not. Anyway, it's a mythological term. And the interviewer says, no, it isn't. And then there's this sort of little, no, it isn't. Yes, it is. No, it isn't. Sort of thing going on. But that happened a lot. You know, I mean, I'm surprised the number of people at that time who say they were influenced by my stuff. I mean, apparently Bernie Taupin and Elton John, I mean, very different people, were, according to Elton John anyway, were fans of my stuff and influenced stuff. I never saw any particularly strong influence there myself. David Bowie read a lot of my stuff, you know, and it was it's how I sort of drifted into doing music again, because I'd given up in, I suppose, around 1963, around that time. I'd sort of given up doing any kind of musical project or being in bands or anything. partly because I made more money writing and I had a family to support. But I became the sort of, I don't know, the musician's favorite. And so I was constantly finding, this isn't a boast or anything, it's just what happened. I was constantly sort of going backstage with one person, and another person would say, oh, wow, I remember this happened with Ginger Baker one time, when the brief time he was playing with Hawkwind. So I had a lot of people who actually read me, many more than I actually thought or knew about. In those, in that period, probably the 65, 75, roughly the period before punk, because punk was a sort of rejection of, of, I don't know, long-haired music, if you like, and the only people that were kind of accepted by the British punk world anyway were, I don't know if I told you this before, but were Hawkwind and Lemmy, and we were thought to have, held true to the cause, as it were, and so the punks liked us. We were accepted, but I was in my late 30s by the time punk was beginning to come out, and when Linda and I used to go to punk gigs, which we did quite a lot, actually. I probably went to more punk gigs than any other gigs. I don't know why that was, really, but anyway, I did. And people would say things like, can we get you a chair? Or would you like a cup of tea? I mean, these are the sort of, this is Johnny Rotten and Rat Scabies, as it were. These are people who, as people usually discover, are perfectly nice people. If they're not in argument with somebody, and so that happened to me quite a lot. I mean, I was seen as a sort of I don't know, Uncle Mike. The way Nick Turner used to be known as Uncle Nick, because he was always popular with the punks as well. It's partly because I think we'd play with anybody, and we liked, we didn't distinguish between one group and another. We had pretty eclectic tastes. I think punk in some ways was my most enthusiastic. People like Ian Dury, I was really admiring of, and I think, I don't know if you know it, but I wrote the book of whatever it was called. Oh blimey, the Sex Pistols movie, The Great Rock and Roll Swindle, and I got kind of passed, as it were, by the band to do the movie, And
you were
going
to write the screenplay for that, The Great Rock and Roll Swindle?
No, I wrote the book. It came out as a newspaper, and was given away at the movie. So, and the book wasn't actually that close to the movie, but I didn't like Malcolm McLaren, so it tended to be very much on the band's side of things. I mean, I very much saw it from the band's point of view, and he tended to take all the credit, and in fact, I never thought he did that much. That anybody could have come along and discovered the Sex Pistols. The time was ready for them. So it is true. Rather more than metal or alternative. Well, no, I saw a lot of alternative stuff, partly because we were frequently on the same bill as other people of the similar ilk. But I suppose I don't know quite why I found myself going to so many punk gigs. I mean, I did a program, a TV program on what was called a punk revival. I think, I mean, punk had hardly died for it was hardly needed a revival, but that's what the TV people were calling it. And apparently, I got the job, which was just interviewing people, and asking them about stuff, because I was one of the few people that a lot of the people would speak to. And that's actually how I got to meet Susie, just through doing that TV program. But I already knew several of the musicians who were on the show. I think that was
You
on.
mean Susie and the Banshees, Susie?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Who I really liked. I mean,
I love her. I love Susie.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
She went to the same gym as Linda, and as Linda said, Susie was the most beautiful person in the gym, without makeup. That's before she started to put on about a ton of makeup.
Mm-hmm.
She's when she came to Austin, Texas, where I was living, we took Linda's mother, who was by that time, I suppose, about 80. Although a Baptist Sunday school teacher, a rather open-minded Baptist Sunday school teacher, and we said, do you want to see Susie and the Banshees? And she said, yes, yeah, whatever. So we took her to a Susie gig in Austin, and all these kind of young punks around were all kind of looking at her like, who is this
goth
old lady?
Kids?
Yeah, and coming up to her and saying, "Excuse me, ma'am," and they're perfectly nice, but somebody, and she said, "Of my age?" And they said, "Yeah, well, yes." She said, "Well, I've never been to a rock and roll show," she said, "and this is the first one I've been to, and I'm enjoying it a lot." And so that was her. Well, that was actually her only ever rock and roll show, I must say, because we took her to see Susie. So I mean, I like the Damned. I saw a few Damned gigs. I think it's hard for me to remember, actually. God, no, I just can't remember. I'm bad at names. I'm very bad at names.
Well, you were there at
the
punk explosion, yeah, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you, just curious, and we're asking everyone this, like, professionally, like, what was the craziest or weirdest or strangest writer you ever saw for a band? The writer, which is like what the band asks for after the gig, like what food and drinks and that kind of stuff. A lot of bands, like famously Van Halen asked for like brown M&Ms or something like that, and it's just a fun question to ask to see.
Well, no, all I really remember is when touring with Hawkwind, Nick Turner was a very committed vegetarian, and so we'd pull into a motorway cafe, as it were, and start piling into whatever there was, hamburger and chips and fried whatever was going, and Nick would sit there with his usually just a plate of baked beans and chips, whatever was vegetarian, and say, "You're not doing yourselves any good." He was like a sort of like a gloomy angel just sitting there, just constantly, and all you wanted to do was just strangling him at that time, because you were starving half the time. You really were just waiting to get some food down you, and
he's wagging his finger at you.
Yes, yeah. He was very moralistic in some ways, Nick, in a kind of hippie way. He was one of those hippies you'd really like to kick, but he was also one of my best friends. I mean, he was the sweetest guy, and I'm really sorry he's gone now. I did my last gig with Nick in Austin. The last actual gig I've done was done with him. a friend of mine, well, he became a friend of mine really through this, put on it's essentially a metal concert called, and we, named after Hawkwind. It's essentially a Hawkwind, Hawkwind, tribute. And the only actual Hawkwind members were me and Alan Davey, who's bass player,
Sure.
and Nick flew over just to do the gig. He was totally out of it the whole time he was there because he got stoned the moment he arrived, and he was already jet lagged, so he hardly knew what was happening. We were both old farts anyway, although I think it's amazing. It was 5 years ago this March that I did my last actual gig. It's hard to think. I'll probably never do another live gig. I don't mind doing them, but people need the money to put them on and all of that. So it's not likely I'll be doing another one unless I happen to get to England at the right moment, at the right time. I love performing, and I think I always preferred. I mean, this is not exclusive, but I really liked the company of musicians more than I liked the company of writers in general. I mean, I had some very close friends who were writers, but actually comic book guys and musicians were people I preferred to hang out with, and I always took it seriously. I know that when they first started to publicize me as being part of a music scene or a comic scene, they saw it a bit as a highbrow guy kind of slumming, with the crude rock and roll fraternity, and I never ever saw it like that. I mean, I hadn't started like that. I had the same background as most of my friends in the music business. We came from the same town half the time, or at least the same area of South London, so. I've in some ways done some of my most serious work for music and comics, and I like to sort of place complicated ideas into what's considered to be by the literati, if you like, not quite as much as but you know what I mean. And I like to put really complex ideas into stuff. I mean, not necessarily done as complex, but the fundamental idea would be complex. And I did that. I did it with Blue Oyster Cult, Hawkwind, and various other projects.
Spirits Burning.
Yeah. Oh yes, definitely. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask, I wanted to switch gears a little bit to the cinematic thing. I've been talking to Jim Kirkland, my friend from Dreaming City, and he's the guy. Always have to plug this Spooky Universe story. My friend Jim Kirkland from Dreaming City. He says that there might. I know that you famously worked with Blue Oyster Cult for this heavy metal, this cult classic animated back in the day. And if there's some
it was a bit of a surprise seeing that. I actually saw it in France, and the movie people had ripped off half the people in the audience, and it was the first time we'd seen it. I didn't even know that a record was coming out, and that so a song of mine was on it, until we sat there in the theater, and the credits came up, and I mean that's it. But we didn't know. We didn't know they pinched our styles. They pinched pretty much everything, because a lot of the time it was done through third parties. I'm not saying that they plagiarized anything, but they used stuff that we had done but didn't know they'd used. So it was a bit of a surprise to most of us sitting there in the seeing the movie.
Well, and your characters have dabbled with film a little bit. There's this film, I have this here, The Final Program.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Jim was telling me that right now there's talks that there's something in the works, maybe cinematically with one of your characters. You want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, I'm not sure how much I can, but you know, these days you have to give a pint and write, you know, sign the contract in your mother's milk before, you know, vows to silence, and it's like
I
a bit
see.
joining the you know, the Brotherhood of the Black Coast. But yes, there's an Eternal Champion project in the works, which
Wonderful.
David Goyer is his company. He's just done God Almighty, what's it called? Foundation, and he did Batman. He
I've
did a
seen
couple
some
of
of
Batman.
that. Good
Yeah,
stuff.
he did some of the best Batman stuff, and you know, he's a very smart guy. I like him, and I really like the first script that they've done. He and a guy called
Excellent.
Dana, who you know is a good writer. I mean, they've adapted. It's essentially the Eternal Champion, but who includes, of course, a whole bunch of my different characters. Sorry, that noise is the train going by, which actually you can play a mouth organ to, and it sounds pretty good. Sounds
Sure. Or kazoo.
yeah. I used to be a master of the kazoo. I played Pete Pavley, my friend that I've worked, you know, I wrote a lot of stuff with. He hated my kazoo, and he hated my taste for country music too, which I occasionally would do. And to irritate him, I'd play the kazoo, and he'd come up to my house. I had in those days a big house in Yorkshire, which was great, had great acoustics, rather like this place actually. And I'd lose my kazoo and couldn't find it, and Pete would actually hide the kazoos until he went back home. It was a train journey, and as he left, and actually on the train with his head out of the window, he'd yell where he'd hidden the kazoos because he hated them so much. But I started. I played the kazoo. You know, I was in a skiffle band first when I was 15, and I played a kazoo in that because we played very cheap instruments. We didn't have very much to you know, we used wash tub basses, as it were, or tea chest basses, and kazoos were an essential part of the equipment. And getting one of those on and off an ordinary bus is extremely difficult. That's a tea chest bass. But anyway, that's another story.
Well, I just wanted to show this real quick. This is with a lot. Well, obviously, this is where a lot of people got their start with the deities and demigods,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and the sci-fi, the fantasy club, the book club. This was the
Yeah.
first book that I read when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah.
If you
Yes.
if you were
I
to
never
pick
saw
one,
those. They never sent me any of those. So whenever stuff like that comes out, you never see it because it's all deals done with publishers, between publishers. So
okay.
it's always a bit of surprise. You know, you'll get a check, but you won't quite know what it's for. Anyway, sorry, you were saying.
I was just going to say, like, out of all the Eternal Champions, which ones do you think is the closest to Michael Moorcock? There's,
Well, it. I'd say that Elric was because he was the first. Well, actually, the Eternal Champion story was the first story I wrote. But Elric was the first sort of extended series that I did, and he, you know, I was 20 when I wrote the first Elric story, and I was still very, I mean, and conceiving him, I'd have been about 18, 19, that sort of age.
Sure.
And I had all that kind of teenage angst or young man's angst
Sure.
and stuff. So it sort of fitted Elric. So he is more he's more me than say Hawkmoon or Coram. Although I can't say that there's much.
I
no,
love
Elric
Coram.
is. Yeah, well, I mean, I like Coram too,
And
I sort
Hawkmoon. Well, of course,
yeah,
you're right.
but
They're all a little
Elric's,
bit of you. There's a little bit
yeah.
of you in all of them.
Well, at the moment, I'm writing a series that's half of it is memoir, I mean, real memoir, reality, and the other half is fantasy, and it's dealing with the Eternal Champion and the how he was conceived and stuff like that, as well as
Wow.
as well as the fiction, which is pure fantasy. I mean, and I've also got characters in I think it's the second book where me in the book actually meet some of my childhood heroes, the people like Tarzan and and various fantasy science fiction characters that I liked when I was a kid that started me doing this stuff.
Well, I just
So,
wanted to say real quick, it's funny, I don't think we got to mention it last time, but Steve told me when I first met him, kind of nonchalantly, that he's a distant relative of J.R. Tolkien, which kind of
oh, really?
he's, I don't know, 20th cousin or something like that, Steve.
My father was doing research on genealogy, and I think his second cousin twice removed. So I think my grandmother was his cousin.
Well,
I just thought that was a funny little tidbit. Everything goes full circle,
yeah. I bet he never sent you a birthday card either, Steve.
No, he didn't, because he passed away before I was born. So
yeah.
he's got a good
That's
excuse.
the sort of thing people do. They're selfish that way.
They're selfish that way.
And
Well, I wanted to say,
I just wanted one question about Eternal Champion, because you're talking about bands referencing your work. I wasn't sure if you were aware there's a contemporary band that's active today from Texas who are called Eternal Champion. Actually,
No, I don't think so. There's so many now that I tend not to notice. It's like it sort of worked its way into my life so much that I don't. When, as I say, when I first saw Stormbringer being used, it was all new to me. But now there's so many bands, particularly metal bands or that kind of band, goth bands and so on, that tend to use stuff taken from my books that I'm not even sure that whether it was me or them, if you know what I mean. I get very, 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 very confused. I've never read any of my own books. I've never reread any of them, and so I'm never quite sure whether who did it first, me or them.
Yeah, they're basically in your backyard, so you might be able to check them out.
Yeah, well, Texas backyard is a bit like Australia's backyard. I mean, there's a lot of backyard.
Well, I was going to say last time we talked offline a little bit, like towards the end of the interview, we talked offline, and we were talking about there's a bit of a legend that surrounds the Men at Work video down under where there's the Volkswagen bus that says Teen Lorne Rules. And you said there was something about a festival or something. Could you elaborate on this a bit?
Well, I was invited to it, but they couldn't afford to fly me over. I've never been to Australia, and I was always angling for somebody to to buy me a ticket, as it were. And sometimes it would happen and then it would fall through, or it would happen and I couldn't do it myself, and stuff like that. So I've always had this kind of liking for Australia. I don't know what you call it, but a wish to go there. And Tanalorn was the guys who were organizing it wrote to me, but they didn't have an awful lot of money, so they couldn't pay for me to go there. And in those days, it was rather a lot of money to fork out, particularly when I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do when I got there, or who was going to be there, because it wouldn't have been the first time I'd gone to a festival in England and it had fallen through or collapsed, or the cops had broken it up or something, like that. And it was a bit more of a. Also, I think that the length of time flying, was the most thing too. I thought, well, if I fly all the way to Australia and then find that the gig's not happened, and I think my wife would have said something about spending the money and so on. So but I regret not going now. I don't know what happened there, but that is Men at Work. I know did put out that video,
and that's why it's on the bus. That's why it's on.
Yeah, it didn't have anything to do with me as such. It had to do with the festival they were going to. I don't think whether or not they read my books were always pretty popular in Australia. I must say, my sales were good and so on. But whether or not they were fans of my stuff or not, and I never knew. It was around the time, I seem to remember, that punk was coming in, and there was a big reaction against what had been popular with everybody else before punk. So I know there were a couple of songs at least that were very antagonistic towards me. I was linked in with I've forgotten what you call it, but sort of flounce rock or whatever
prog rock.
Yeah, no, not prog rock, no, glam rock, and that sort of.
Oh, I see.
People. Oh, I don't know. Massive concerts with a lot of money spent, and everybody with a lot of hair sort of blowing in the breeze, that sort of thing.
Arena
I
rock.
actually never really listened to.
Arena rock.
Yeah.
Over here in the States, we call it arena rock.
Yeah, that's and I have never been to one of those gigs. I mean, they put me off actually. I don't like the idea of going to them. I mean, I saw what's his name. The guy from Fleetwood Mac on his own, and he was good, but I've never seen Fleetwood Mac or any of those sort of.
Lindsey Buckingham?
No.
Mick Fleetwood?
No.
Okay.
I really had an aversion. I think when I first got into doing what you might call popular music again, it was really based on Ladbroke Grove, Portobello Road, that area. Where it was essentially the same as Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco, and it was intense, but we had an ethic. And I know when I've just written this in my new book, that when Hawkwind first started getting gold discs, and that's and started getting into the charts, 3 of the members of the band spontaneously left because they hated the idea of
you're not underground anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And I really did like to identify. I simply did identify with underground bands. I mean, and so I really didn't like that kind of big, as you say, arena concerts. And that's it. I mean, I'm nothing against the guys who did it. I'm nothing against the audience who went, but it just wasn't my thing. I just. Hawkwind started off. They used and Pink Fairies and various other bands like that. We were generally called people's bands, or we
Right.
work, and Hawkwind always went into the same pubs as the audience, always mixed with the audience
Sure.
on an equal basis. And I think that's what I liked about it more than anything. Same with punk. There was a general equality, between audience and performer. And certainly for me, when performing, that sense of equality, that sense that you're sharing something, that that they're giving you something, you're giving them something, is very, very important to me.
Mhm.
I wouldn't have done it at all if that hadn't been the case. I think going back to Lemmy was like that too. There are just some people who don't want to be gods. And I certainly never want, I've written a lot about gods, but generally my gods come to a bad end in my stories. They don't last very long.
Right.
And I've even got, in I think several stories, the moral at the end is pretty simple, don't believe in gods, believe in yourself. And that really is deeply ingrained to me. So I won't babble on about that, but
Well,
that's certainly how I feel.
well, Linda's always gives us a a strict timeline.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I just want we're coming up against an hour here, but I just wanted to see if you have any last words for your fans out there.
Well, I mean, I would hope that if they like my other books, they will read the books that started with The Whispering Swarm. There's 3 of them: The Whispering Swarm, The Woods of Arcady, and the one I'm working on now called The Wounds of Albion. Because they talk a lot about background and the bands that I liked at the time, in the 60s, and what we were doing and so on. So, it might be nice to have that as I don't usually advertise my own stuff, but I would like it if they read those. And I also I'm still afraid that I did a record called Live at the Terminal Cafe, which wasn't live at all. It was completely studio made, and that has a lot of the same sort of stuff in it as is in these books as well, and it doesn't seem to have had an awful lot of exposure. And again, I don't know. I mean, but it doesn't feel like it's had a lot of exposure. People who've heard it, again, the ones who liked it say they liked it, and the ones who didn't like it have said nothing. But there's a long kind of speaking piece at the front, and I still think it's a mistake to have done it, because people may think it's a spoken word record, but it's actually more Cajun influenced than it is anything else. I think it's Cajun and country influenced, and I rather like it. But so there, I've done some plugging for MJM Publications.
Well, we'd love to have you on, and again, and this could be like the second segment in the Eternal Tales of Mr. Michael Moorcock, and it'd be great to have you on again.
We didn't even touch
on
this.
Yeah, I'd be glad to come on. I mean, we might run out of questions because I've got a very bad memory, and I mean,
I'll never run out of questions.
Okay, all right.
Okay, well, we have an amazing time talking with you. So
yeah, well, I enjoy it. Yeah, thanks a lot. And we haven't been caught by Linda yet. I know why too. It's because it's Saturday and the football's on, and she is not American football. She likes soccer. And she's a great soccer fan, so she's probably watching that and completely forgotten to come and apprehend me.
We dodged a bullet.
Yeah.
All right, well, I don't want to upset her because, we'd love to have you on again sometime
Yeah,
in the near
yeah.
future, talk about Spirits Burning, which it would be The End of All Songs Part 2, which will be coming out at the end of the year, I'm
Yeah,
guessing.
I would think
And
so. Yeah, as I say, I'm still going to record my bit for that. So, or my bits for that, and so I've no idea actually what they want me to do, but I'm an old whore. I do whatever anybody asks.
know thyself, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's funny. Well,
Probably
I
keeps
just
me
said
going.
I just have one last thing to say, and that's I wanted to end the show by saying I dedicate this show to all of my old friends at RPG Central, Knights of the Prime Material Plane, and the Dreaming City Fellowship, and my little sister Lisa. And so remember, look to the stars, carry that torch of enlightenment, and strive to be a disciple of rock and roll and the Brotherhood of Orpheus. Peace.
Absolutely. You too. Everybody out there.
go. Thanks a lot. Hope you have a good morning. Thanks again. Thanks so much for hanging around.